blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam la'asok b'divrei Torah. Beautiful. So, this week, as I mentioned in the service, is the, I think, somewhat confusing story about the 12 spies. And there's many reasons why it's confusing. But one of the most important reasons is because it actually misses details. And I didn't discover this until 2 a.m. this morning because I couldn't quite fall asleep, and I just still there was something off about the story. I just didn't understand why God would deliberately send spies into the land, like only to have them come back and have bad reports. It's almost like God knew that that was what they would do. Turns out, in the first chapter of Deuteronomy, around the 13th verse, the story of the spies is retold. And it explains that actually the spies requested, that the people requested to send reconnaissance scouts into the land. That piece is not in our parsha. It starts with God giving the commandment, which is actually something you run into Torah study a lot, where something is odd. You read the text and you're like, I'm just so confused. Something is not quite right about this text. Rashi, the 11th, 12th century commentator, often used this approach actually to make commentary. He'd look at a text and he'd point out the thing that's missing to explain what's bothering him. And so in the 20th century, a really, really amazing commentator that I encourage you all to get to know, Nechama Leibowitz, developed a system or a didactic of teaching Torah study. And the way we describe it is what's bothering Rashi. If something is bothering Rashi, or he wouldn't comment. And so students will sit and look at the Rashi and then figure out, what's the question driving this commentary? And so actually, we're going to start with that. So in the very first, it's 13:1, in the very, very first line of this parsha, this is in blue, it's the second chunk of text, Rashi says Rashi is commenting on the opening line of Shalach Lecha, our parsha. And he does so by describing the incident in last week's parsha with Miriam and gossip. And he says, why is this section dealing with the spies put in juxtaposition? He doesn't say that literally. This is adding some words to help clarify. But put in juxtaposition with the section dealing with Miriam's punishment. Why are they side by side? To show the grievousness of the spy's sin. Because Miriam was punished on account of the slander which she uttered against her brother, and these sinners witnessed this, and yet they did not take a lesson from her. What? They witnessed her doing this, and they didn't take a lesson from her? What lesson did they need to take from her? That's the question. That's a good one, actually. I think that actually can answer like many of the questions of Torah, especially this part of Torah. Because we're in this awful period of Torah that has turned down. We're in a downward spiral. It started with the incident with Miriam, maybe before. It started with the protests about meat, etc. But really last week's parsha was the beginning of a downward decline. Well, that's redundant, but whatever. The beginning of a decline, a period in which the Israelites just routinely mess up. Next week we're going to read about Korach and the rebellion of Korach. And you just see like each level of Israelites demonstrating a lack of faith, or AKA they're messing with the big guy. I think that's a great way to put it. But I think there's a deeper thing, and hopefully as we look at the text today, we'll start to explore it. Yeah?
I think it has to do with one's point of view. So if Miriam saw the Cushite, thank you. So it has to do with one's point of view. I think and where one's mind is. So if Miriam saw the Cushite woman as less than, or less value than the other Israelites, that was her perspective, and that was slanderous. Right. And then she's spreading that negative perspective to others. I think that's similar to the spies. Yeah. 2 of them did not have that. 10 were terrified. 2 were not. So why is it? They apparently saw the same things. And so it has to do with one, lack of belief in God, lack of faith, and seeing out of fear, seeing something and seeing it in a very negative light, rather than having confidence and saying, hey, God got us this far, God will be with us, as the 2 who did not say that.
Yeah, I would say that is a great hypothesis that I think will be proven. And let's be diligent and look really closely at the text, which I've laid out here, just so we can really see it happening, your argument happening in the moment, because you did lay out a lot of things that I'm going to point out. So let's remember this. This is like the thesis statement of today, and let's dive into the details. And
We
figure
read
out-
it in Arminian on Thursday.
Oh,
spoiler.
shucks. Okay.
And-
So
and
all the
discussed
secrets
it.
were revealed? No, but there's some fun things. We'll get to it. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to point out something funny, because you did, well, let's get into this. What did the spies report back? You said something that's very true, that they all saw the same thing. Can somebody read for me, please? Read the English. You could read the Hebrew. I'd be really impressed. But I'm not sure other people. Oh, Gloriana wants to read. And Gloriana, if you want to sit closer, it's more fun to be like, right in front of me where I can wink at you. I was gonna, or I can actually accidentally hit you in the face. Thank you.
Okay. At the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting the land. They went straight to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran, and they made their report to them and the whole community as they showed them the fruit of the land. This is what they told him. We came to the land you sent us to. It does indeed flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakites there. Amalekites dwell in the Negeb region. Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites inhabit the hill country, and Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan.
Thank you. Wonderful. So before I dive into this, I want to paint the picture. They're coming back, and actually, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism has already painted the picture. They come back with a bundle of grapes. And I was actually listening to a really great podcast on this from Pardes in Jerusalem. If you're unfamiliar with them, I highly recommend you check out their stuff. They have really good podcasts, and they have a great school. If you're ever in Jerusalem, you want to spend a whole year studying Torah, you can go there. But some of the rabbis at Pardes pointed out that the logo for the Israeli Ministry of Tourism is like very ironic, because who is coming back with the grapes? These people who, go ahead. Caleb, Joshua, and then the 10 others, right? So maybe this is Caleb and Joshua, but you could also say it's any of them. And those are the people who specifically say that the land isn't a place to go. And so it's kind of funny. I thought it was kind of funny. I mean, it's very ironic that that's what they chose. And this is a light jab, right? It's a light jab, laughing at the nature of an image from the Israeli government. Now let's see the difference between a light jab and slander. We're going to go into that, right? And it's important to know the difference between the two. That's what our work is today, to know the difference between the two. What does slander do? What becomes slander? I think particularly thinking in terms of leadership, how does slander impact the others, the people you're leading, okay? So thank you so much, Gloriana, for sharing that. We know that the spies give a report of the land, and that report is largely some concrete details. I think towards the end, some of the English suggests that there's a bit of and it's not that great with the words however, and a couple words. However, there's another one that I saw that I wasn't sure about. Yeah, moreover, thank you. Even worse, yes. And I'm looking in the Hebrew, moreover is, I just saw it. Oh, it's the 4 lines from the bottom. It's right over the word Negeb. Number 28. And I'm looking at that line in Hebrew. There's no word that says moreover. It's just the, which is a very cryptic word in Hebrew. Could mean any kind of connector. It could be but, and, if, however. So we have to be careful about how we relate to the English. However, the word fs, which it ties to the word for zero, I think that does have a negative connotation. So I'm not totally sure. I think part of it, I just pointed out because Joshua and Caleb also report back about those people. But they're not saying however or moreover. And we know that because of what is said next. So can someone start to read the next section? Where do things go wrong? Thank you, Maxine.
One of the rules is it's always the person on the opposite side of the floor.
Yeah, right, I know.
Caleb hushed the people before Moses and said, "Let us by all means go by all means go up, and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it.
So just pause for a second. That's the point I was going to land on, right? We got this wonderful assurance from Caleb. And now, Maxine, take it away.
But
I'm sorry, overcome it? That's a good question. It's the land, certainly.
And the people there,
But
yes.
and the people there. I think it's almost like a situational. We can overcome it.
the scary
situation.
people.
Yeah, for sure.
The scouts didn't disparage the land, they just disparaged the people.
Oh, that's good. Well, and which people are they disparaging?
Well, they're guilty of lying. I wouldn't say it's a slander, because at least in English, it's to defame a person.
Yes.
Which is not what we have here.
Yes, but pause, because the literal word for slander is in the text. So we have to grapple with that before we assume that it's not slander.
Well, you have evil report, whispering, and jibe, and I would just say evil report, because it was
Yeah.
false.
But-
the other thing about these guys is they're chicken.
Yes. We're going to get there.
Okay.
I promise you, I did an intertextual study of the word debat, because I was very curious about it. I never realized, I had spread calumnies. I don't even know how to say that word. Is that how you say it? Calumny? Oh, that's a weird word. Calumny? So I'll just say other places where you find it are, for example, in Ezekiel. Ezekiel sees other nations talking four-letter word. Thank you, Myra. Not Myra. That's not the four-letter word. No, talking you know what. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I know your name too well. That's a problem. No, in the context of Ezekiel, the other nations are critiquing and making fun of Israel because Israel is so spineless in this like threat. It's a prophetic threat that if you act like this, you're going to get displaced. God's going to reject you, and all the nations are going to spread slander about you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm changing the subject for 1 second.
Okay,
You know that
we're
I'm a
gonna-
Holocaust-obsessed person, and the last year I've taken a number of courses about life in Poland in many ways. And what's amazing is that all the slander associated with Jews is exactly
Yeah,
the same.
isn't it
as
wild?
Nothing has changed. It is so
It's
interesting.
really wild.
The very words, the very
It's
accusation.
really
There
true.
is a straight line, which is just fascinating.
Do you have any specifics just to like paint the picture of it?
Saying that they were sheep, they went to their
Yeah,
death,
yeah,
passivity,
yeah,
spineless,
yeah.
all of which, of course, is
Spine.
not true. But
Yeah.
aside from what actually happened, just the representation, the words are there.
Yeah.
And it could be regardless of what they would have done, those words would have been extrapolated and assigned.
Yeah,
So
you would really love to read Nachum Krochmal.
Okay,
I
don't
gotta
wanna change the subject, but
totally. No, it's
so
important.
apt, I couldn't help but
Yeah.
interject that.
I think. Look. Torah study is not about being linear. Okay, it's about being. It's about fuzzy logic. It's about making associations and raising. I know, especially here. But that's what I love about you all. So I love being here. It's supposed to be about tangents because that's a really important point, right? And that's a point that says that what the biblical text is saying and the fear that God has is exactly that. And we're going to get to that at the end. That's what God kind of threatens at the very end, that this is what's going to happen to you. So thank you. I think that was important. And again, I really recommend you read Nachum Krochmal, the father of Herman Cohen, not father, intellectual father. He talked about the fact that Jews have had this through line in history spiritually that goes in these cycles of them being the subject of slander, just to use the word, and then again, surviving, persisting because of their spiritual power, and then falling again, and it just keeps going. All right, now we'll get back. Yes. Would you like to read more, Maxine? Thank you so much.
But the other men who had gone up with him said, "We cannot attack that people, for it is stronger than we." Thus they spread slander, or literally whisperings, among the Israelites about the land they had scouted, saying, "The country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the Anakites, are part of the Nephilim, and we looked like grasshoppers to ourselves. So we must have looked to them.
Thank you. So just to point out the word here, it's verse 32, it says, Vayotzi'u dibat haaretz. And what came out of their mouth was a slandering of the land. Go ahead.
So,
Thank you, Maxine.
so for the people at home. So there's a recurring theme in Numbers about the doubting of the Israelites
Yes.
of God's providence. And you see it in almost every portion in Numbers after Miriam gets rebuked.
Yeah.
And
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
and,
Good.
and so what you have is a persistent denial of God's providence.
Yeah.
And the end result is the original Israelites all died off.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and there's no trust in God from last week to
Yeah.
the end of Numbers. I
Yeah.
mean, that you could summarize it with that one sentence.
I think that's so important because, yes, so important comment he made that this is the portion that basically decrees the fate of this generation. This is the portion that says you're going to wander for 40, well, not wander, you're going to be in the desert for 40 years and you're going to die off in the desert. And there's a lot of rabbinic commentary about it, and I actually don't trust myself to dive into it today because it's been kind of fresh for me this week. But I think one comment I wanted to make, and we're going to see it in a sec, is that I think you have to think about someone who's been really traumatized and cannot change the way they think because they have been beaten down all their childhood, all their adulthood. I worked at Beit Shuvah. It's a rehabilitation center in LA, one of the only Jewish 12-step rehab centers. And the number of people that I saw with the same story, many of them just, in light of pride, I'll say many of them queer, who had been mercilessly bullied, teased, put down, put into conversion camps. And those people had horrible substance abuse problems. It was immediate. It was just a through line. And working with addicts and watching them try so hard to change. And some of them do change, and it's really amazing. And a lot of them can never change. And it's really difficult. And I remember, so my partner also does a lot of work with detox, but she's a psychiatrist, so she actually does it in a hospital. And she was describing a patient who wasn't quite, this patient was just being a little bit difficult and argumentative with the nurses. And immediately I was like, check her stuff. She's probably hiding something. Because there's such obvious signs, right? When you're working in addiction, such obvious signs that a person is, to use the phrase, on the derech, or like they're following their sobriety or not. So I think it's a really good metaphor, or I think, not a metaphor, but a parallel, just to think about as we look at why the Israelites are acting like this. It's like they're addicts. They're addicts to the past. They're addicts to the slavery that held them and prevented them from being the people that God wants them to be. And it's a constant struggle. And you're absolutely right, Carl. It's the theme that goes throughout Numbers, and it starts with last week's portion, and it goes on. It goes on, and you continue to see the generation just either being killed or forced to stay in the desert for the rest of their time. But their children go into the land, the next generation. And that's what Deuteronomy is. Right? Deuteronomy is all the next generation sitting and then learning about the ills of the last generation and being told that they can do better. So go ahead, Gloriana. Thank you for the mic exchange. I feel like we need 3 mics, but there's.
Oh, sorry. Well, I just wanted to add to that and maybe offer an alternative. Like, I'm not sure if I would call it an addiction to the period of slavery, but I would definitely say that there was some psychological attachment because, at the risk of sounding too personal, I have been a victim of abuse my entire life. And one of the hardest things about escaping is getting out of the mentality that you're in when you are basically trapped by someone else. And it's like you keep making excuses to stay, and you keep thinking that if you leave, it'll be worse. And you just keep telling yourself that maybe it's not so bad if I stay a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And maybe I think that's what the Israelites are going through, especially when they hear this slander and they're like, oh God, this land is full of these terrifying people who are so big that we're like grasshoppers to them. And so
That's really important.
it really resonates with me, what you said, and also the Israelites' fears.
I really appreciate, though, the slight adjustment of language, because I'm speaking almost from there's still a critical element in what I'm saying, and you have helped me to take out the criticism and actually look at what it looks like to be someone stuck like that. You see yourself as a grasshopper. You allow yourself to be something that you don't deserve to be treated as, because that's the nature of being abused over a very long period of time.
I really appreciate everyone's comments. Even if it's not a question of abuse, I think we also have to remember that these were people who were slaves for hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years, yeah.
And there's a generational factor that they were taught,
Yeah.
just as, my family taught me, don't make a fuss, don't complain,
Yeah.
keep your head down.
Yeah.
It's safer that way.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't make noise. Don't be noticed. Just, it's safer that way. And that's the way people were taught to keep their children safe when they were in slavery. And you don't just go from being a slave to being free and being a totally confident, I can take on the world kind of person.
Yeah, you don't. No.
And
That's something we struggle with, Myra. I mean, we are a post-Holocaust, I'm multiple generations past, but some of us, the immediate next
well,
generation.
It wasn't directly my parents, but just as immigrants.
Yeah.
And, we hear so much about the pivotal moments in the Bible, Moses and the Ten Commandments, but
Yeah.
I'm really relating to the grasshoppers this week. I
Yeah,
really am.
yeah, absolutely. It's so important to see that in you. Because
And then we hear God says, let's let this generation die out, because there is a generational, there's a legacy of slavery. It's not just slavery ends and all of a sudden you're a new person. It's who you are as a person and what you've been taught your whole life.
Yes, thank you. It's beautiful. I see many hands. I'm going to get them. Give it to Susan. I think she was first. Just quickly, one of the commentaries I read as I was refreshing this portion was, why is it that they can't? First of all, why is it slander of the land? That's still a question. We're not. Why is this slander of the land? And also, why can't they go into the land? Period. Is it just a punishment? But actually, one of the explanations I read is really compelling, that the whole point of the Torah and its laws is you're set out on a mission to create a society that's different, right? You're supposed to go into the land and interact with the land in a way that is completely revolutionary. And that land, I just want to add, has a personality of itself. You'll see it. The land swallows people up. The land has action verbs that it does. And that land is wrapped in the bigger story of the covenant, that God promises that you'll be in this land that gives to you if you give to it. I think, again, about Bechukotai, because, of course, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, it's my bat mitzvah portion. But in Bechukotai, the whole threat is if you don't treat the land right, the land will kick you out. So it's this interactive thing. And I think that the insight is that you can't put a people there that can't be in that difficult and important work. It's just not going to work out. Just my thought. I know, I'm sorry, but Susan has been waiting patiently.
So Myra was talking about the slave mentality, and I was thinking about Naomi drawing parallels to the Holocaust, and it's not just
Yeah.
the person in power and the person that is being victimized, it's also the bystanders.
Yeah.
I just watched A Small Light, which is the story of Anne Frank from Meep's perspective, and the people in the people around her, you know, it was they didn't necessarily approve of what was going on, but they also didn't want to make waves because they didn't want to be next.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that in a way they are also being persecuted in their own rights by just trying to be avoided and not be noticed. So it's
Yeah.
not just those two parties, it's also
It's
everybody
really-
else.
yeah.
And there's this ripple effect.
I think that's really important, and it shows up. I mean, you'll have to be creative with the word bystander, but if, for instance, you interpret bystanders, the people receiving the report, you immediately see, if we turn to the back, their reaction is insane.
Yeah.
Just going to put that out there, and that kind of fits in
Right.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think actually Maxine was next, and then Carl. Do you still have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of talked about it when you said the whole purpose is to create a new society. And so, I mean, I really do believe that the Torah is like an antidote to what is the basic default pure
It's beautiful.
position of humanity, to be
Beautiful.
afraid of everything.
Yeah.
Because the unknown is always terrifying and scary. And so it can be an addiction to fear, it can be addiction to trauma, to having been traumatized and the effects of that, and not be as
Gloriana?
Gloriana mentioned, because trauma, we even know too from the studies that are being done, trauma is passed in the genes. I
Yes.
mean, that's why when Myra mentioned, I got the same thing, is because my grandparents witnessed pogroms. I mean, that's why they escaped, to
Yeah.
escape from the pogroms. They'd hear a siren and they'd get stock still and turn white. So that's that message that I just absorbed. But I think what Carl was talking about is that's why God is so angry in the Torah, because the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
are rebelling against. God says, this is what you do. I'm going to work with you. I'll be there. I got you out of Egypt. I
look, I
had sent
already
all
have a
these
track
plagues.
record.
I did all this
Can't
stuff.
you see?
I spread the waters for you. I'm giving you manna. I'm giving you water. What else do you want? But the fear is so pervasive.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Levine, who was our previous rabbi, always said, we partner with God. And that's the message, I think, really, the message. If we partner with God, we can face anything like Joshua and Caleb. Okay, we don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to believe in God and we'll figure out a way.
Yeah, beautiful. Carl, thank you, Maxine. It's powerful that we as a community, I think so many people here can relate to this because of who we are. Go ahead.
So I just want to build a little bit
Please
on
do.
What I said before. What Maxine said about visual display, about the parting of the seas, the Israelites really cannot sustain keeping that visual in their head. And what you see is, for example, on Parasha recently, people just changed just told themselves lies about the existence in the desert versus the existence in slavery. And so when you think about the ways that God communicates, most of the time it's Vayedaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor, and that is Moses to the people of Israel. And what they really need is some kind of ongoing visual, or some
Yeah,
ongoing,
well put.
ongoing speech from God, and they get none of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And in the early Bible, God was seen as almost like a human being, and there was, remember in Exodus, there was the portion where Moses and all the elders went out and had lunch with God. And
That's right.
they're not saying, the people in the desert are not seeing any of that,
Yeah.
and they miss it.
Yeah.
And-
Just see the punishment.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl. I really appreciate that. I'm going to grab this. Sorry, I really shouldn't. Like hobbling. Here you go. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I feel like still this concept of slandering the land has not been
Thank you.
answered by what is meant by that. And it makes me wonder, is this maybe a remnant of paganism and the idea of Mother Earth?
Ooh, that's a very interesting. You know what?
That, this earth, this land, it's bountiful.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
saying she's going to
Yeah,
devour
yeah,
you
yeah.
up?
Yes,
That
yes,
that's
yes.
there's something wrong
So-
about that.
I love that. I love that you just went there, because it really does capture something. I think absolutely the way that they relate. If we were to look at this text as historians, there's absolutely an influence in the way that they understand land, and it's really. I love this because I was thinking of it more from like a Jungian perspective. That the land is an archetype, Jungian, Carl Jung. So Jung basically Jung basically looked at things like Gnosticism and understood it from a psychological lens. So in Gnosticism, you have, for instance, the earth having a personality, nature having a personality, and having this kind of relationship with it. And so the relationship with the land is the relationship with God. It's all wrapped up in one. And so, this is my theory, that it's slander because they're saying that the whole design of the land, the future plan, the way Torah will be enacted and created into a living government, all of those things are one. So to say that it's something you can't conquer is to say that the land is not for us and it's hostile. Really quickly, there's a great midrash, and it comes at the very beginning in Genesis. And the rabbis ask, why was Genesis the first part of the Torah when it's for the Jews? You know this one. I see you nodding. Maybe not. I don't know. But they say it's because God created the earth, and it's to show that God is the one that decides who gets to go where. And it's done so that other nations don't say we're robbers. It's just really powerful because it was written around the time of Constantine. It was all about crusade and conquest. So for them to be actually sensitive to the idea that these people might see them as robbers and to create a justification for them to be in the place, given that context, is powerful, I think. Constantine's idea is I can conquer whatever I want with no justification. But for the Jews, it was really intentional. It was no, God wants us here to do something, to create something that's never been created before. Very powerful. Anyway, so I really appreciate you went back to that. Who was next? I think it was Myra. Please do.
Thank you. This is such a great insight.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that in the line where it says, "We shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it," that has to be referring to the land because it's a female singular pronoun in the Hebrew.
Yes.
So it's aleha, v'yirashnu ota. It doesn't
Yeah.
refer to the people. It refers to the land.
Well, good catch, Myra. Very good catch. And I think that's,
Hala, it's all feminine.
it's about the
singular.
land. It's not about the
land.
people. Yes, their perception, their fear is painted by the relational, terror. But ultimately, it's about the relationship with the land and not the people. Thank you. That was really good. It's tricky because it's in the Hebrew, but I'll tell you a little trick. That was not a word. So if you see a word in Hebrew that ends in ha, especially like aleha, it means to her. So it's like the direct object feminine, okay? So ha as in an aleha, or even like you could say deberha or deberha.
The same word as
No, this is actually like a case ending. So, oh, aleha, yes, so yes. Yeah, like all over. No, it's different. So it's a preposition that means like, well, aleha is a preposition that means to her or over her.
Right, like Aleinu means
Yes,
over us.
yes, it's, or on us. That's a specific usage, just to get really grammatical and nitpicky. No, it's a fun one. So sometimes, sorry, my thesis advisor was a grammarian, and it's coming out right now, folks. I'm sorry. It's grammar, if you get into it, is amazing. Okay, so aleinu is a way of, it's on us literally, but it means we have the responsibility. So it's a really specific use of the preposition all. Anyway, very fun. Now I want you to go around and say aleinu all the time, okay?
I already do.
I
already
a lie. Sorry. Thank you so much for indulging me. And I think you were next. Oh, you were. I'm sorry. Oh, you're done. Okay. Okay. Well, we are having such a rich conversation. I do want to point out another element of this portion that is very important. It's on the next page. And if you look, the people's reaction to God, or to this commentary, first of all, is they all freak out. The whole community broke out into loud cries, and the people wept that night. And they're like, what if? This is going to be, why is God taking us to die? You know, asking these like really insane questions. And then at one point they stone, I think it's Caleb and Joshua. Caleb and Joshua, where did it go? I just saw it. I thought I bolded it. Oh, well. There's some place in here where the people actually stone Caleb, Joshua, and they start throwing stones. In fact, you could say they start a riot. And I think that's a really important thing to capture, that the language that these spies, which is not even a great word if you think about it, they're scouts, these scouts use is inciting. It incites people to throw stones, to cry, to be in a state of disbelief, to freak out. And then we go into Korach next week, and there's rebellion, right? So I think there's something here that's saying you can tell something is slanderous by the way that it provokes people who are receiving it, right? So when we're thinking about, I am going to say it, although I'm going to control this conversation. When we're thinking about, for example, criticism of Israel, I think a good metric is to see how that criticism incites people to react emotionally. That's one way. I think on the flip side, healthy criticism of Israel is not to incite a riot. It's language used to make Israel better, right? So, you know, or maybe it's just to like poke fun, but not in a harmful way. I know that seems increasingly impossible. I see that look on your face. I was like, I know. But we still have to do it. We still have to be in conversation. It's tough what we do.
Can I just ask about the logo?
Yeah. So the logo, as I was saying earlier, is very ironic, right? It's the logo for the Israeli Ministry of Tourism, and it's because the scouts come back with fruit. And so there's these two rabbis at Pardes that pointed out that this is a very weird logo. But then actually Carl said something that made me understand that maybe it's Joshua and Caleb and not the other spies. But we don't know. And I do think it's kind of ironic. Like this is a good time to use the word davka. That is precisely, ironically, not the right thing to put in your logo. But like I'm saying this because from a place of knowledge. I'm saying this from a place of like hearty chuckles. I'm not inciting a riot by making fun of this logo.
Or if you're super familiar with the Torah, it's kind of haha, very funny.
Yeah, it's kind of actually like maybe it's a wink. Like they just put it out there to see if somebody gets it. Henry.
This comes from many, many years ago, but it seems to me that what I remember was that the 10 spies came back with nothing but fears and so on. But Jacob and Caleb came back with this enormous bunch of grapes. And that's what the logo is about.
That's really interesting. So that's not what it says in the text, but that suggests to me there's a midrash that says
Probably.
that. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to check that out. That's really cool.
That's from when I was 6 years old, so I could be wrong. You know?
I don't know. So, I mean, the midrashim we learn when we're 6, they stick with us, you know? Go ahead.
You know, I was thinking about how the slander starts the riot and like someone, Joseph wasn't participating in the slander either, right?
Joseph is not here.
Oh.
Yeah, Joseph died Joshua. Got
Whoops,
you.
yeah.
No, it's okay. There's similar names.
So it's It's interesting to me that the two spies that didn't participate in the slander were the ones who were stoned, because I think that just illustrates the harm that it does. It reminds me, I did have a friend very close to me who she was falsely accused of sexually harassing someone in her writing community.
Wow.
And many years later, the person who accused her admitted in writing that his words were false.
Wow.
And she had been kicked out of the writing community. She lost her leadership position there. And she went back. She tried to get an apology. She did not get an apology. She was not welcomed back in, even though she had proof that it was false now.
Wow. So I think that really is a good example of a time when, the impact of slander specifically, right? That slander has this power to change people's lives for the worst. Yeah. Oh my God. She said Jean Carroll. You know, I mean, that was really, really hard to watch, right? And they are. And they're doing so in a way that is not part of the conversation. I actually really wish I'd written the name down. I'll tell you a little anecdote, and then I think it's 12:30. We can decide if we want to stop or go. I was actually a LaFell Fellow. It's a fellowship for rabbinical students through APAC, and we do a very intensive couple years of study and going to many, many places in Israel and seeing things that you would never imagine seeing. And I know that APAC has a particular reputation with, more progressive people, and I do think sometimes it gets excessive, but it does an excellent job when you're in the heart of it, of educating the leaders that go through it. I just want to give APAC that credit. So we went to this vineyard, and the mayor of Efrat is a very contentious settlement. He was at the dinner table with us, as well as this guy who, unfortunately, I can't exactly remember his position, but he was in one of the very progressive parties in the Knesset. And they were sitting right next to each other and having a conversation. It was wild. I mean, it was I can't come up with a good metaphor without being really contentious. But it was such a literal expression of the number one thing I took away from that, which was, even when you can't stand the conversation, you have to be at the table talking and interacting, even if it hurts, even if it physically hurts you, to sit next to someone whose opinions are so radically different and wrong in your mind. To sit and listen to them is to begin some crazy important work. It doesn't mean there's going to be a solution that comes up, but if you're engaged in that way, you understand better what's at stake, right? Go ahead.
You're touching on the thing that bothers me about this passage, and it's always been one of my least favorite ones.
It's tricky, yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
they don't talk it through.
Yeah.
They punish, they suppress.
Yeah, that's true.
They might have avoided the rebellion if they had given
Yeah.
people an opportunity to vent a little more.
Yeah.
Those Ammonites are really big.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, telling somebody a lie isn't going to advance the conversation.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're picking up on something that's really important to say, that in our position today, in our contemporary position, we're always going to be really dissatisfied with this part of Numbers, because there is a very punitive tone, and it's you're wrong, punish, you're wrong, punish, you're wrong, punish. That's a language that speaks of the time it was written. And especially given that this is a contest, it's not like God is the only God. Ironically, we think that this is a monotheistic religion, it means there's no other gods. But in the Bible, it was that God was competing with other gods. And we're choosing this God versus that God. And because of that, God can be very aggressive. And that language of aggression is a language of legitimacy in ancient governance. Very hard to sit with. And I think actually as a rabbi, it's a little bit of I mean, this is just my soul punishing me, but it feels a little bit of a cop-out to lie on historical arguments. And so hopefully one day I'll have a more Torah-ingrained response. But for now, that's kind of what helps me navigate this part of Torah, because otherwise, you're absolutely right. It's just sort of punish, punish, punish. And given that we raised some sensitive points today in our conversation that require a level of understanding and empathy that is not in this passage, I think we know better. I think we know better, and we don't have to respond to slander this way. In fact, I think you're inspiring me to realize the big takeaway maybe is when someone's being slanderous, for you to take a step back and ask, why do they need to grab power in that way? What's going on with this person? It's hard, because often if you're the subject of slander, like all the more so, or we'd say kal v'chomer, that means like all the more so. But that radical kind of empathy is the kind of empathy that transforms the world. So I think that leaves me in a good place today to say to you, I encourage you to try one moment this week of practicing radical empathy, just once. You can be mean the rest of the week. But no, just 1 minute moment that's like, catch yourself responding to someone being a jerk, and see if you can calm, and just that moment, practice radical empathy. Shabbat shalom. I'm so grateful for you all. I love this. You're the best. The name.
I should read.
Oh, yes, novel